It is a remarkable testimony to the illiberal atmosphere that the First World War generated in this country, that people accepted such far-reaching legislation.
At the outbreak of the First World War, the government is worried about sensitive information being leaked to the enemy. So, on the 8th of August 1914, the Defence of the Realm Act, or DORA for short, is passed through Parliament without debate. Barely more than a paragraph long, it gives the government wide-ranging powers it sees as essential to conducting the war effort. It will go on and prove to be a catalyst that accelerates key social changes in Britain.
Well, DORA covered everything that was supposed to assist in the winning of the war. Rather famously, it also included people's daily lives, whether they were in some way assisting the enemy. It might be by, of course, distributing pro-German propaganda. It also included things like whistling in the street and having bonfires in your garden. And it covered, very importantly, drink and also drugs. It left a great legacy and was a very fundamental and sweeping measure.
I think the Defence of the Realm Act and the swiftness of its passing is a remarkable moment in Parliament. But I do now think, with the greater role of judicial review, the greater role of Europe, all sorts of barriers which exist now to that kind of swift legislation, there would be greater hesitancy about passing such a piece of legislation.
DORA is a simple act ensuring anyone caught spying or spreading rumours can be tried by a military court. It also puts docks, ports and communication systems under the control of the military. The Act was amended 6 times over the course of the war and slowly extended its reach to all areas of British life.
Some of the measures were very extreme ones, which, to be fair, reflected the fact that nobody knew quite what a total war would be like. It was a war to be fought, if you like, by the entire population and not simply by people in the armed services. And it is a remarkable testimony to the, you might say, the illiberal atmosphere that the First World War generated in this country, that people went along with, accepted such far-reaching legislation.
One of the key amendments to DORA was made by Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, back in March 1915. It allowed the government to take over factories to produce munitions and led to a massive increase in Britain's war output. This was the start of a truly industrialised war. The concentration of workers into urban areas would lead to social upheaval and changes in British life that went far beyond increasing the ability to wage war.
I think if you look at DORA as a piece of legislation, then if you look at the remarkable presidential power which Lloyd George enjoyed as Prime Minister, combine those together and that provides the sort of infrastructure which allowed for the future social changes.
Its positive side, I think, was that it drew attention to many of the social aspects of society in Britain at that particular time, for example, in relation to the conditions of industrial workers. And it did encourage activity and collaboration with the trade unions, which meant in many ways the First World War was a rather good period for industrial workers. Their wages went up, their conditions of work improved and so on. It did, of course, reflect the fact that women were being introduced, and in the longer term, therefore, the status of women and conditions of work, quite positive results emerged from DORA. So it is, I think, a great paradox of the carnage and horror of the First World War and the attacks on civil liberties, nevertheless, in an indirect way, had beneficial results.
The legacy of the Defence of the Realm Act is as complex as the original legislation was simple. On the one hand, DORA helped Britain win the war by allowing a massive increase in industrial production. On the other hand, it heralded a new era of censorship of the press, prohibition and the widening of police powers.
to scrutinise some of this legislation when it's being demanded at a time of national emergency, at a time of wartime, is often rather sparse. Meanwhile, there will be lots of civil servants, ministers, using this moment to put through pieces of legislation and rules that they've long had their eye on. And so they always say around here that when the parties agree to pass a piece of legislation together, that's when you should begin to be worried.
For more information about Parliament and the First World War, go to www.parliament.uk/WW1.